Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles Sabansi. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and where we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And today we got a pretty interesting show for you guys. But before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, as you guys know, there are a lot of shakeups that are taking place in the sports world, especially on the corporate level. As you guys know now, everyone is fully aware of this. ESPN had a litany of layoffs, when they laid off about 20 front-facing on-air talent. To name some big names, of course, you had Jalen Rose. We recently had Mark Jackson. You had Keyshawn Johnson. You had Max Kellerman. You had Jeff Van Gundy, and a litany of others. And by the way, I don't think the cuts have concluded. I think you're going to see more cuts coming in the future, and I think people should be bracing themselves for these things as they come down the turnpike. Now, when those things originally took place, there were two things people were trying to understand. Why did it happen, and what happens next? And at the time, Shannon Sharpe had actually departed, Undisputed, Skip and Shannon's Undisputed, which left a major opening, as a matter of fact, on Undisputed and a void to fill. And then the news started to become, okay, who are they going to replace Shannon Sharpe with on Undisputed? Then last night took place, and a pretty big piece of news dropped, which was Richard Sherman was officially going to be the replacement for Shannon Sharpe on Undisputed. And actually, we read from an article, from a Sports Illustrated article that I just quickly want to touch on. It says, Richard Sherman agrees to join Undisputed with Skip Bayless per report. Just over 2 months after Shannon Sharpe's departure from the popular FS1 debate show Undisputed, it appears that the current host, Skip Bayless, has finally himself a new sparring partner. FS1 is reportedly hiring all-pro cornerback and Super Bowl champion Richard Sherman as the show's new co-host, according to the New York Post, Andrew Marchand. Sherman is expected to appear on 50 to 100 shows per year, mostly during football season. The network is also, listen to this, the network is also reportedly interested in adding Keyshawn Johnson, who ESPN recently laid off. The new gig will not interfere with Sherman's work as an analyst on Thursday Night Football's broadcast for Amazon Prime's video. Sherman and Bayless had a previous run-in during Bayless's stint co-hosting ESPN First Take during Sherman's playing career, in which the pair got into a shouting match about their respective career accomplishments. Now the two will get a chance to air out their differences on a fairly regular basis. Now, two things I wanted you to pay attention to in that soundbite. Number one, they spoke about the fact that they're acquiring Richard Sherman, which I think is a good move, and I think a lot of people are going to like the move, number one. And obviously, given their history, it's probably going to drive ratings, and a lot of people are going to want to see how these two gentlemen mesh on television. That's number one. Number two, they also mentioned that they're planning to go after Keyshawn Johnson, who now is a free agent formerly employed by ESPN. So it looks like they're going to be poaching some of those, some of the talent that they used to have over there, right? And then it made me begin to think, wait a minute. Could this be a play for Skip Bayless and those boys at Undisputed to finally surpass ESPN? Now, some people are saying you're absolutely out of your mind. How can FS1 surpass First Take, ESPN? That's virtually impossible. I mean, have you listened to Stephen A. Smith talk? Have you listened to a lot of his numbers? Well, it turns out, according to the numbers, FS1 has already surpassed ESPN as a network. But before we get into that article, this video is brought to you by sponsor Aura, who's also the official sponsor of the T-Wolves. Do you know what the fastest growing crime in America is today? It's identity theft. Imagine trying to log into your email only to see that your password has been changed. Then you start getting weird notifications from your bank and credit cards, only to find out that all of your personal and sensitive information has been totally compromised. If you think it can happen to you and your family, just know that in 2020, over 49 million Americans were victims to identity theft, costing them a combined $56 billion. That is why we are excited to partner with Aura, who's a sponsor of this video. Aura is the #1 identity theft and financial fraud protection. Aura monitors the dark web and alerts you if any of your passwords and accounts have been breached. And funny enough, after using Aura, I discovered some of my credentials were floating around in the dark web, and the app showed me exactly when and where the breach happened. In addition, Aura allows you to set spending alerts, and they'll notify you of any suspicious transactions. Aura is 4 times faster than any of its competitors in alerting you if someone is trying to open a credit card or obtain a loan using your name. And remember this, every 14 seconds, someone becomes a victim of identity fraud. Don't let it happen to you. Now click the link in the description and try Aura for free for 2 weeks and see if any of you or your family's personal information has been compromised. Start your free trial at aura.com/dreamerspro. And when you try Aura by using the link in the description below, also know that you're supporting this channel. Thank you. So what I actually want to do is I want to read from an article from awfulannouncing.com, but it's via Sports Business Journal. This article says something quite interesting. It says FS1's cable carriage estimates surpass ESPN for the first time. After a decade, FS1 is barely the most carried sports number in the United States. And then it goes on. For the first time, the most carried cable sports network in the United States is FS1. Per the Sports Business Journal, Nielsen's latest estimates indicate that FS1 is now in 71.375 million households, down from 73.906 million in January. Despite the drop, FS1 has edged ahead of ESPN, which is now in 71.321 million households in January. In January, ESPN had 74.1 million subscribers. As you can see, the numbers are saying that there are more people watching FS1 in their homes than Undisputed. Now, both of them experienced the drop, but obviously the drop that ESPN experienced was much bigger, given that they lost 3 million viewers. As a matter of fact, ESPN at one point in time used to have over 100 million subscriptions. Now that number is down to 70. And a lot of people out there speculating that that number is going to continue to drop even further, because I think ESPN has done a fantastic job alienating various sections of his subscriber base, or whatever you want to call it. And this creates an opening for companies like FS1 to step in and kind of fill that void, right? So to me, given the series of moves that are most likely going to be taking place, I think there's a real chance that FS1 could actually surpass ESPN. Now, obviously, ESPN has a bunch of different outlets and stuff like that. And by the way, that may be the reason it inflates some of the numbers. Like, for instance, on ESPN First Take, some of those numbers are inflated because they have more outlets, right? Whereas in the case of FS1, they don't have FS1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. You understand what I'm saying? So to me, I think that these guys are here to play. I think that they see how ESPN is kind of floundering. They're looking at some of the decisions that which have left a lot of people scratching their heads. To give you guys a quick example of what I'm talking about, Mark Jackson. They just recently let go of Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy, who used to cover NBA games and NBA final games with Mike Breen. And a lot of people are upset with that. They're like, how could you do something like this? How could you get rid of Mark Jackson? Well, the more you piss people off with the decisions that you make, the more people are going to search for an alternative. And in this current marketplace that we find ourselves, there are a plethora of alternatives, not just on TV, but also on the internet, right? So to me, I think that the ground is still moving. There's a lot of shakeups that are still going to take place. And I think that in the future, you're going to see some former people that either used to work at ESPN. I think you're going to see some of these people back or with, what is it, FS1. So what I want to know from you guys, what do you think about this report, number one? Number two, do you think FS1 has a legitimate chance to really surpass ESPN going into the future? Whatever you guys think, leave your thoughts in the comment section, and we catch you guys on the next show. Peace.